This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of WEBIT Virtual, Dr. Plamen Russev.
Hello, and welcome to WEBIT Virtual, the Thought Leadership Network. Another great episode ahead of us on the topics of health innovation and how it's changing the world, but this time with a twist. Yesterday, we've been hosting John Scully and John Nosta, of course, with the host of WEBIT Innovate program, Professor Shafi Ahmad. We were talking about the future. We ended up at gene modification, but before that, actually, it was all about wearables, AI, and analytics. It was such a fantastic discussion, which if you have mixed, you can just go to virtual.webit.org and search for yesterday's edition. It was truly amazing. But today we're going to have another point of view, actually another 4 points of view. And you will hear leading journalists who are somehow connected with the health innovation policy concerning health from leading global media, including BBC, USA Today, CNBC, and CNN, and their reflection on how health innovation is changing the world we live in. I would say there are a bunch of things in this world that really matter. One of them is health. We all know why. We're all in lockdown. We are all in our, I was going to say virtual studios, in our homes and virtual worlds now. And we all know how important is this one single virus that keeps us away from people we like to hug, from our colleagues, from our families. That important is health, and that's why it's such an important driver, and that's why at WEBIT we put special focus on it. You will hear trends, you will hear expectations, and you will definitely hear news that are worth and that you can freely share. You can be sure there will be no fake news and there will be no if that or that. So I don't say we're a scientific channel, but definitely it's a place where you will hear the truth. And without further ado, I would like to welcome again here to the studio our first panelist. And those of you who've been yesterday with us will know who she is.
Afua Adom is a broadcast journalist and writer at CNBC. She is a journalist with over 15 years of experience working with ITV, the BBC, Arise News, producing and writing and presenting news content and features focusing on sustainability, lifestyle, and health.
And Afua, welcome back to our studio. How it feels to be the second time?
I know, right? It's just like I just left and now I'm back again. It's great to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. Yesterday we were having this joke because we knew everyone in the panel yesterday. I knew most of the people for the past 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. You were the only one that we were joking that we've never met before. And there we go. We've just met yesterday.
And now we're old friends.
We are, but let's not forget our first meeting was not just in our ordinary city, it was in the virtual space.
Exactly, the virtual world, our first virtual meeting. And it was a great discussion we had yesterday, like you so rightly said.
I would be grateful if you reflect on it during even greater discussion. I'm looking forward to all your amazing colleagues joining us further. I would like one more time to put a focus on our viewers have already seen your biography, very short, it's like 30 seconds, but I would like to put a very special focus on your personal commitment on supporting women of color and Africa journalists and women. That's so amazing. I would love to make a special edition on empowerment and inclusion, and I would love to join us there. But now, if you allow me, I will invite the other. Thank you. I invite the other participants. Let's see the next one.
Jayne O'Donnell is USA Today's health policy reporter. She is also co-founder of the Urban Health Media Project, which trains high school students to do multimedia reporting, health and social issues. Jayne has won several awards for her work, most notably for her articles in USA Today.
Jayne, a warm welcome. Thank you for joining.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
It's such an honor to have an award-winning journalist like you, and with a specialty in healthcare and particularly policies, and of course writing for very well accepted and well-known media like USA Today. Thank you so much. Share with me, please, what are your expectations from this panel? I know mine, but you know the other colleagues of yours here, you know the topic. What would be a success show for you?
Well, I'm really interested in hearing what everyone has to say, including you. I suspect you're a big fan of technology, and you think that it's going to answer or address a lot of the questions in healthcare. I think there is promise, but I actually think we need more real people out there working one-on-one in the healthcare space and trying to get rid of the distrust in the healthcare system and actually meet people where they are. Technology can be great, but that kind of one-on-one contact with healthcare providers that you trust, I believe, is what's really needed in the healthcare system.
At the end of the day, it's all about people, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. People who
Thank you
look
so
like
much. I'm in a hurry to invite all our participants, and then we start this wonderful discussion. And now I would like our studio to present the next one.
Dearbhla Gavin is a reporter and broadcast journalist across BBC Radio 4 and BBC Business Online. Before that, she worked at Bloomberg and the Business Post. She also spent a year working in Geneva covering events at the UN.
Hello, and welcome, Dearbhla. How are you?
It's so great to be here. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for joining. You have been part of, and your professional path is also quite respectful and amazing. And we have absolutely no patience to hear your thoughts, your reflections, and your ideas and vision for where is it heading. The beauty of having this panel of every Thursday panel with leading media is that we hear people who are talking to so many other. So that gives a special experience for the attendees. And I'll ask you the same question. What would be your expectations from this panel?
Yeah, well, I'm really, in such amazing company here with all of the panelists. I mainly focus on the economics and everything, and what COVID-19 and health kind of means economically, and the impact that has on countries, because ultimately the bill at the moment is with every country. So for me, looking always at the economic perspective, I'm really interested to listen to the other panelists who are working within the medical field and the diagnostics field and reporting from that angle a little bit more. I can take care of the economic side of it for everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. And fourth, final point of view, let me introduce you the last participants of the panel.
Ryan Pryor is a cross-platform associate producer based at CNN's World. He is most passionate about writing on politics, foreign affairs, health, and science. He is fascinated by figures who dedicate their lives to changing our world.
Ryan, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Even more excited. Now when the four of you are presented, I can't wait to go into the discussion. But also, let's measure the KPI, your expectations from this episode of Health Innovation and Leading Media Forum.
It's not often that I get to spend an hour with journalists from several other outlets, so I'm really excited to meet with my colleagues from here and around the world and hear their perspectives, and it'll be a good feeling for me just to kind of feel more united with people in the same field as me.
Thank you so much for joining. Now, everyone in the studio, and let's start with the questions. Afua, I have a question for you, and I would like everyone to take it from here. Let's start with the news. I mean, we try not to be a breaking news at all. That's your job, guys. We're about thought leadership. But I would like to go deep into something that was very disturbing and still is very disturbing. We know that the death rate among the people of color, particularly the Black and ethnic minority community, was badly hit by COVID-19 in the UK. Can you please elaborate on what kind of measures are taken now? How much technology is supporting that?
Well, yes, the death rate amongst people of colour here in the UK has been shocking, to say the least. So at the moment, this is the statistics that we have is that Black women are 4.3 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than their white counterparts, and Black men are 4.2 times more likely to die than their white counterparts. For the Asian community, it was about 3 times more likely to die. And even for the Chinese community, it was about 1.2 times more likely to die. So clearly there is a huge disparity there. And yesterday when we were talking, John Nostell was talking quite eloquently about reading between the data points. And I think that's what will be the turning point when it comes to talking about treating ethnic minorities, and also should there be a second wave, is protecting ethnic minorities and those communities from these astronomically high death rates. Because yes, we know that Asian communities are more susceptible to things like diabetes and high blood pressure, which means they have more underlying health conditions, which means therefore they're more likely to be affected by COVID-19. But there's also many socioeconomic factors that we need to take into account as well. So people of color are more likely to be healthcare workers, they're more likely to be transport workers, security guards, taxi drivers. We had other statistics that came out earlier on this week from the Office of National Statistics, and it said that 38% of people who died from COVID-19 were taxi drivers, security guards, and transport workers. And those jobs are predominantly done by people from ethnic minorities. So I think where Moonshots and health innovation can come in is if we can look at all these data points and where they intersect. It's not just about, if you're a Black woman, you're more likely to have a certain health condition, or if you're a Black man, you're more likely to have a certain health condition. We also need to look at the socioeconomic factors, what job you do, where you live, if you have access to fresh air, to exercise. It's about analysing all these data points, putting it all together, and then protecting certain communities as well. We have tales of our healthcare workers who are predominantly, I'm talking about Black healthcare workers. And I've heard stories, I've been on Zoom calls with 300 nurses who have been talking about the fact that they are often forced to be put into frontline jobs where they don't want to be, but because they're afraid of saying no to shifts that they won't get them in the future. There's all these kinds of layers, there's all these kinds of data points that we have to take into consideration. So like I say, should there be a second wave, then this is something that we have to look at, and this is something that we have to protect all these people from, protect these minorities from, because to be a Black woman and know that I'm 4.3 times more likely to die from COVID-19, depending on my socioeconomic background, is very scary. It means that certain communities in London and around the world, I know in America, they've had similar data and it's been analysed that African Americans are also more likely to die. It's very frightening. And when I talk to people in my community, when I did a report on this for one of the channels I work for, Arise News, I did a report on this a couple of weeks ago, and the people I talked to, I spoke to someone who survived COVID-19, I spoke to someone who's lost 3 people in the same family, which is not unusual. That's the problem. It's not unusual and it's not unheard of. And it's very scary. And then you have a whole community of people who are very afraid. And I think this is where health innovation can really come to its own.
Absolutely, Afua. And at the end of the day, actually, we are all scared. I mean, I don't mean me, you, and I mean as a humankind. And we see some patterns which are already, I believe, part of the usual behavior. That's the new normal, I believe. But we will see this. I just wanted to address this at the very beginning of our discussion so we can move now to questions about real technology innovation. And if I can go now to all of you as a pool, let's start with all of you. I would like to hear your outline of some sustainable healthcare innovations that you are excited about. I would like to hear your reflection, and let's play the game because you're journalists. All of you, each and every one of you can speak until the end of the show. So my request is to play the game of the 3 minutes max. So everyone answers within no more than 3 minutes, shorter the better, and we can have a really very compelling discussion. So who would like to start first in regards of real exciting and innovations that you are happy to talk about?
I'd be happy to start.
Please.
And I was so interested to hear from my colleague in Britain, because I would have thought, like, I could have said almost the exact same thing about what's going on in the US, and and it'd be interesting to compare data, and I'm going to be following up with her because I think I work with young people. I have a nonprofit called the Urban Health Media Project, where I'm working with high school students of color, and everything she mentioned is exactly what we're working on. So I guess health coverage, but we have the bigger problem. So we have almost the entire swath of the South they don't have health insurance. So they're not even seeing doctors. But so any kind of technology, and it's not whiz bang, but any kind of technology, remote monitoring that can be done of these patients that are most vulnerable to getting serious illness and dying from COVID are the ones we hadn't addressed enough as a society before. Diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. So it's finding out tracking the people that frankly are costing the health system the most, and even as I often say, I mean, even if you as an individual don't personally care about the less fortunate, it's costing you a lot of money. So the doctor needs to know when these people are having, if their blood pressure is up, their blood sugar is up, if they might have symptoms of a heart attack, and then get those people, but get real people, as I said in the beginning, to be working with them. A whole force of community health workers is needed to make sure that these people are getting to the providers they need, whether it's mental health treatment, physical health treatment, food, or transportation to the doctor. And then just the one other thing I want to mention, I did write about recently the smart thermometers. And that can make a big difference where they can track they can keep track of people's temperatures wherever there's millions of these thermometers out there now in the US. So you could actually plan ahead, and companies are giving them out because they want to see, or paying for the data because they want to see where to sell more Lysol. This was before COVID. But now if you could track where the fevers are going up around the country, that is a very important development.
So much for sharing. I have an additional question for this, but I'm not going to forget to ask it. But I'll just give it to you, to the panel, just for some reflection after this. Imagine if we were having all of us not only wearables as we all have now. I mean, I think that in Europe, in US, many parts of Asia, wearables is like starting from the phone and then ending up with everything else is everyone's part of the everyday. But what if we were having implants, and where we are going? But this is a lot about privacy, a lot about policy making, and that's where I would like to hear your thoughts. Nothing is sci-fi now, right? It's possible, and I have friends with implants already, including paying their bus tickets with implants, which is quite weird for me. But anyway, so let's go back to the same question: technology that inspires you. And I will go with our next lady in the panel, Brian. We're always last. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry. You're muted. Just 1 second. I need the studio to. Oh, okay, please go ahead.
Okay, good. Well, really, what excites me most is the simplest apps and data that is coming out in recent weeks and months and will come out ahead. So if we think about just simple things like the efficiency of hospital processes. So apps, we know that the everything in a patient's journey revolves around the chart. So any kind of input that the cloud can have on that, where, you know, from a very kind of material level, hospitals don't have to keep files and files of papers and charts anymore. If it can all be stored on the cloud, and then a patient's history from the very beginning, the first day that he or she entered a hospital, if that can all be just at the click of a mouse, something like that really excites me, because, you know, it takes so much of the labor out of it and so much of the admin out of it. I have a good few friends that work in hospitals through the whole spectrum of roles, and, you know, actually a couple of them retrained as doctors after kind of working for a little bit in business. And it was really interesting talking to them, because they were coming at it from the point of, you know, they were looking at these hospital processes, and this wasn't just in the UK or in America or in Ireland. They were looking at the admin processes, and they just couldn't believe it, because they thought that, you know, a hospital, like anywhere else, and especially when you're dealing with people's lives, needs to have proper administration and proper management of data and files and history and records, and it just wasn't getting done. So I'm really, really excited about the cloud and how that can help with customer files. Just also quite basic things like managing communications and workflow within hospitals and within wards. So, for example, I've been talking to a lot of nurses here in the UK that are dealing with obviously they're kind of all in dealing with COVID patients at the moment. And, you know, everyone works on a shift pattern. And when someone stops their shift, you know, the issue is sometimes that there's no method of handover. So, you know, you might be dealing with the patient for 12 or 13 hours. And then there can sometimes be, because obviously now they're dealing with such mass of people and everyone's trying to, you know, have 8 eyes in different places, it can be difficult to kind of get that proper handover. So I know nurses have been telling me that a lot of them are communicating on WhatsApp, but I think there's more sophisticated technology that can be developed in terms of how to manage communication on wards, and that would be life-changing for medical staff, because the simple thing of go and check on this patient, or I have just done this with this patient, that kind of thing is, you know, it saves lives for sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And now back to Ryan. Ryan, exciting technology that you have been seeing, that we've been following, that is sustainable and is health innovation related.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is so fascinating about this is not just the technology that's being used, but the number of people who are able to use it, the number of researchers or scientists or doctors or, you know, other types of healthcare professionals. And earlier in my career, I produced and directed a documentary called Forgotten Plague, which is about a disease called myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome. And that was a film that really showcased, I think, all the ways that things can go wrong for a disease if people are not collaborating. And the polar opposite is happening here with COVID. We have a humanity-wide response. Nearly every scientific lab or every drug manufacturer is looking at ways that they can contribute to the response. And what's happening is that for other diseases, what might take 3 decades to get done has now been getting done in about 3 months.
Yeah.
And a really exciting story I'm working on right now is with scientist and professor from University of Pennsylvania Medical School named David Feigenbaum, and he's leading a meta review of all of the treatment data that's come out on. So there's been more than 4,000 papers published in the last 3 or 4 months about drugs that have been tried in COVID.
4,000. Wow.
Right. 4,000. That in this other disease, ME/CFS, I covered, that took 3 or 4 decades to accumulate that many papers. 4,000 papers in 4 months, and of those papers, 155 of them or so were what they considered good enough quality to really extract data from. And they weren't just anecdotal, but they were large enough cohorts or had the right endpoints, so they felt like they could extract data. And they've created a database called Corona, obviously called that, but where they're allowing physicians or scientists around the world to access that, and they want to have a kind of a God's eye view of what's happening with this, and so they just accepted that paper for publication. So not just the 4,000 papers, but now it's possible to actually do meta review of all those papers. And so I've been just absolutely thrilled to see science happening at this quantum pace.
I would be delighted now to have from 4 of you, because what Ryan says is fascinating. I didn't know 4,000 papers, scientific papers for 4 months. That's the beauty of the human mind. But on the other side, we have so much propaganda. We had your colleagues from Business Insider, from CNBC again, from Al Jazeera, BBC. We were talking about information, disinformation in the COVID times. I would like to hear your thoughts on this. What do we say? We have currently 9,000 people on that channel with us with WEBIT Virtual. Thank you so much, wonderful WEBIT community, for being with us. What would be your advice for our wide audience, and of course many of them digerati policymakers, in regards of this information and disinformation? How do we build critical thinking in that particular situation? At least it's open. Yeah.
It's very difficult. It's long been a passion of mine to learn more and teach more about how to read scientific studies, because I don't consider myself good at it, but I've been getting a lot about particular drugs that could cure COVID, for example. And a lot of people are going to look at that and not look at where it's coming from, know how to read how many people were tested, whether it's been peer reviewed, whether the journal has a high impact factor, meaning it's actually quoted often, and we could all, any of us tomorrow could start a scientific journal and publish each other. So to look at what the source data is and what the date of the source data is. I wrote a story at the end of a 3rd week in February, I believe, because I was sitting next to Anthony Fauci, and he did an editorial board meeting with us at USA Today. What he was saying then is very different from what he was saying a month later, and certainly now.
That's interesting.
And the story that I did is now gone viral on Fox News picked it up, and for reasons different than what my intention was. I was just saying at that point, he said the risk was. But it's gotten people really fired up, and people are finding things that say, oh, masks don't work. But when did this come? This was before they decided masks would work. So just considering the source and looking at the date and doing your own research, not just listening to your neighbors or word of mouth or whoever's in your social network.
Thank you so much. Who would like to?
I think. Sorry, I was saying that I think I would definitely agree with what you said, especially that last part, is not just listening to your neighbors, people in your social network. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've been inundated with messages on WhatsApp and other messaging forums, and a lot of the stuff we get is just pure lies and myths and things that people have made up, and then they circulate it and they send it to other people who sends it on to other people. And it's that whole thing of, you know, that it's just taking a moment to sit back and, like you said, do that critical thinking. Where's this data come from? Who is sending it? Is the person who send it, are they paid to send it in any other way? Have they sponsored it in some kind of way? And I also think that people need to vary their news sources. People need to not just get all their news from Facebook, or not just get all their news from BBC, or whatever source that you pick. People have to sort of do their own due diligence and look around and look at different news sources. Don't rely on just one news source. Don't take everything that you read as gospel. I'm not saying that journalists lie, but what I am saying is, if you want to get a global picture and a holistic picture, then you have to consume news from different sources, from different parts of the world. I mean, I see a lot of people, you know, writing things, 5G conspiracies, all the rest of it. We've all seen this stuff. And I'm sure we've all sent it. I'm sure we've all discussed it with our friends, you know, said this, you know, it doesn't look very right, and this doesn't look correct, and let's have a bit more critical thinking. But people also need to vary where they get their news from. You know, social media, WhatsApp, all those kind of WhatsApp warriors on there, it can be very, very damaging, as we very well know. It's just having a bit of discernment, you know, and but it's also trying to explain to people in a nice way that they need to be discerning when they intake their news, or when they look for it as well.
Well, but still you're talking about the way it's, you know, critical thinking works. What about some tools? I mean, there are fact checkers, etc. What do you use? Maybe you can share your own experience here as people who have to fact check everything. Ryan?
I mean,
yeah.
We have fact checkers now. We actually have a new group of fact checkers, and I always try to go to the original source material, and it is doing a lot of those things that, you know, I'm so glad she mentioned it was somebody being paid for the study. There's so much pressure on anybody in academia to get published, to get tenure, and then they are often consulting outside of academia. So whether or not they wrote it because they're being paid by the pharmaceutical industry or a different industry, you don't know. But you do need to look at what the conflicts of interest are and those kinds of things. But going to the original source material as much as possible, by clicking through to the links in the story. And does the study really say that? Does the study really say what the article said? And when you get a press release, as journalists, you know, you probably all experience, you know, you get a press release about a study that the study doesn't really say that, because the marketing department has to trying to drum up interest in the study.
Yeah,
yep, absolutely. So Ryan, what are your tools?
Oh yeah, one comment I'll make is that the most important tool of a journalist is the telephone. And if something doesn't feel right, you need to go ahead and call up the researcher where it came from, or the source where it came from. And if they can't put together a coherent story for you on the phone, that's usually as a huge red flags come from there. But outside of my main job at CNN, I serve on the board of directors for a group called the ME Action Network, and we put out a kind of a 3-part guide for how to spot misinformation about coronavirus, about, you know, diseases or science in general. And so the first point in this little 1-pager we have is look for stuff that's highly inflammatory. If it's deliberately meant to divide, that's usually a big red flag. So if something's written with what appears to be the express goal to encourage disagreement or to encourage distrust within a particular community, or promotes ideas or agendas that otherwise wouldn't gain support unless they were using inflammatory or sensational tactics, that's one thing to be very careful about. So looking for, you know, just emotionally neutral language in some of the thing that's coming out. The second thing that people should really look out for is stuff that attacks institutions in bad faith. So if it looks like the point of this is to destabilize government or destabilize institutions, or if it has a conspiracy, you know, a tone that's conspiratorial, that's another thing that we need to make sure that people are looking out for. And then the third thing that I think is really common across a lot of the misinformation that comes out is that it's going to employ rhetorical tricks, or it's going to exploit common glitches in thinking. So you can think about a straw man attack, which is attacking the weakest form of a particular argument, is one thing. Looking for ad hominem attacks, that attacks the person who came out with a particular idea and doesn't attack the actual idea itself. Those are common straw man or common rhetorical fallacies that people should need to look out for. And one of the things that just, if the argument does not simply appear rational, it may not be rational, and then therefore it may not be true. And when looking at conspiracy theories, if it's more likely that if it's so convoluted that it would require a whole of society or whole of government conspiracy to enact some sort of covert plot, you can use Occam's razor, which is the simplest argument is probably true, that it's not possible for that many people to conspire in secret. And that's a good way to cut it. It's not likely that Bill Gates and 5G and all these vaccine companies in the Wuhan lab all conspired to do something evil. The simple thing is that it may just be human error that caused all of this, and not a covert plot.
Now you started with the conspiracy theories, and don't be surprised if I ask you about the 5G and the trends of COVID wherever they are. So, but yeah, there are a lot of these, and maybe a lot of these theories are in the area where we really do not have enough knowledge. We really don't have enough experience. And obviously this could be exposed by any groups with specific interests. Maybe at the end of this show, I would like to request to make a list of the top conspiracy theories you have seen, and maybe some of those that you fact checked. That would be, I'm sure, very interesting for our attendees. But I would go now to Dearbhla, and I know that your latest researches are on innovation and healthcare. So let's discuss a little bit. Yesterday we were talking a lot about it, the role of AI in healthcare. And I was elaborating just to give you a hint of what I expected, where I expected to go. Currently, we are fighting with a biological virus, right? Some, like Luc Montagnier and others who were invited here in the studio, Nobel Prize laureate for finding the HIV virus, say it's been laboratory treated, etc. But it's a virus. It's a biological virus. How about in the next couple of years, let's say 10 to 20, we go into the next step, the next stage of integrating AI and moving further, being connected. How about that? When it will be a mixture of biological and cyber viruses working together, it would be, we cannot deal with a biological one. But I'm just pulling your leg, Dearbhla. Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, when it comes to AI and the tools that are being explored, they already are at the moment. What really, really excites me is the concept of 3D printing. And I came across one case where there is, and again, this kind of goes back to speeding up efficiencies in hospital, because, if I'm probably geared to kind of to care about efficiencies being, a business journalist. But I think the concept that doctors can practice an operation before going into the theater, and then off they go and they do the operation, and the entire activity is sped up. That I think is really exciting to me. The fact that a lot of people with masks now, and anyone that has a 3D printer, they're using it in their homes. And I know that a lot of technology companies are actually making the templates for different products available on the internet. So anyone that has a 3D printer can get their products out there, which I think is really exciting. I know as well that there's a hospital. I'm pretty sure it's in the center of America, and they're actually creating bladders and organs with a 3D printer as well, and they can be used for education. And there's just it's all about the efficiencies in the systems, and I think that's where, because the healthcare systems across the world, because we have an aging population and a growing population, there is a reason why we have headlines across the world about health systems being under pressure. So when a health system is under pressure, you're thinking that it has all of these people coming in and only so many people to be able to treat it. So it comes back to the efficiencies in the processes. And I think this is what will be, apart from hopefully getting more money, I think health systems, the thought that they will get cash injections in the next couple of years is fantasy, because all government is thinking about keeping economies stable at the moment. So really, health systems are already so stretched. Now they're really going to have to think about their resources, and that money from government might not be as free flowing as it has been up to now. So I think anything that just makes everything work a little quicker and a little better, and that people will be able to get treatment, on a really, really shorter scale. I think that is what will change the lives of people in hospitals, and then ultimately save lives as well of people in hospitals. Because if a doctor can treat 5 patients in an hour versus 10, that's where the change comes, and that's where lives are saved. Because healthcare, it is an industry, but what is at the end of it, it's a life that's either saved or not, and that's what.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And here I would like to hear all of you, because particularly Jayne, because that's in her field, but all of you, because it's at the crossroads of policymaking, privacy, etc. So we all want more people to be healthy. This would mean less money. I mean, we all know that healthcare is truly bureaucratic, highly inefficient, and an industry that takes so much money. And this all together also having troubles in making sure that there are no doctor's mistakes, etc. This builds up, of course. So there is a need to change. I would like to reflect first on the 3D printing, Dearbhla, because 3D printing of organs means that the person who needs an implant so far just waits for someone to die in order to take his organ and have the right to live. 3D printed organs means that you don't wait for someone to die. You just have it. So that's so beautiful. That's where technology can bring us. But then there are all the concerns. We always put this first, that we are, as a community, as a WEBIT community, we would never allow our kids to be prisoners of their own private data. And now my question for you, how about if there are technologies that build some sort of reward into good health? How would, this obviously I believe will incentivize people to do more, to care more, but this would at the same time be a challenge when it comes to privacy. So how do you see this dealt in the future?
I think I just missed one word, and more real world into healthcare. Is that what you said?
You mean in the which of the words? Because I've said
no, at the very beginning. But I certainly, I think what you're saying is to incentivize the health system to treat everyone well while protecting their data. It broke up a little bit, but I think that certainly in the U.S., one of the big issues is that they need to be, when we talk about patient safety, there need to be more incentives or penalties if somebody, if a hospital or a doctor hurts somebody, you need to have, there needs to be more transparency around the 250,000 people whose lives are lost through preventable medical errors. That's an estimate, but it's an often used one. So that data needs to get out there. We need to know, I mean, there are ratings of these hospitals, but we don't know, any of us, at least in this country, if I want to go get hernia surgery tomorrow, I'm not going to know how many botched hernia surgeries any doctors I'm looking at has had. And that probably gets into some of my, if I'm one of the people that had a botched hernia surgery, it gets into my personal data. But I'm not sure if I'm addressing actually, what your point is, but I do think that privacy is a big concern. As somebody who's covered safety her entire career in one form or another, I just personally am not as worried about privacy as I am transparency and pressure on the companies to do the right thing. I'm amazed in this country if a hospital makes a number of mistakes that lead to the death of a patient and doesn't and covers it up, or covers up a problem in the hospital that it can and does cause infections, that the penalties are so small, like I could write a personal check for them, like a couple $1,000s. So it's just the system, the reimbursement in this country is very strange when it comes to that, and there needs to be more personal contact and actual caring about the patients.
Well, Jayne, this was a very policy correct answer, I would say. Let me ask the whole panel. A very clear question. We have an opportunity to, you have all of you, to cover a story where an implant goes into the body of a person and it collects all the data. It protects from stroke. It protects from anything that, I mean, the major reasons of that still are stroke and the diseases that we all try to fight these days. It's not obviously the COVID and others. So we can protect with all the information and algorithms the health of that particular person. But this obviously will go into the hands of a corporate. It might be a well-known from today or a new one. And obviously, this means that that particular person who shares that data will be 100% exposed to that someone who collects that data. So what will be your materials about this?
I want to just, through the last 5 years or so, I've had the honor of being a part of this Stanford Medicine X community. And through that, I've met a number of really fascinating kind of data activists who've tried to take this problem into their own hands. And one of them is named Hugo Campos, and he had a pacemaker put into his heart. And he decided he wanted to hack that pacemaker. He wanted to extract the data because that was something that belonged to him and not to the company that had made the pacemaker. And when he was asking these questions about what would he do with that data once he had it, and his reply was a good reply. He said that none of your damn business. It belongs to the person who has generated the data, and it should not belong to a corporation. And I'll talk about another patient data activist I did a story on recently named Andrea Downing, and she was worried that all of these private Facebook groups where patients were sharing their information about, in this particular case, it was breast cancer and people who had mastectomies, but it could be anything from people who suffered from opioid addiction or people who suffered from having sexual abuse. And if that information is being shared online in a discussion platform, that is a kind of thing that needs to stay private. Well, which is also to say that it needs to stay under the control of the patient who has had the experience. So if it's a pacemaker in the heart where it could be controlled by a corporation, or if it's in a discussion forum where it could be controlled by Facebook or another entity, patients need to have full control over their own destiny. And in a world of big data, when that is not properly anonymized, That's a key thing. I think that you can extract insights from this data if it's anonymized and it's not attached to someone's name or birth date or location or any other identifiable characteristic. So I think blockchain is one of the emerging technologies that enables sufficient collaboration across all fields, but then can also be tamped down and it's very hard to hack into.
So I hear you, and if I can wrap up what you were saying before, I would like to hear depth of what you will say. But so definitely we are going there. Definitely, whether first it will be with wearable, then it will be with implants, but then we will be talking about how we protect that data, or maybe we should start talking about this now. So we make sure that only the owner can share it with the particular explicit agreement with that. Is this what you're saying, Ryan?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
You
Dearbhla,
definitely
what
want
is your take on
consent.
that?
I was just saying you need consent. People have to certainly say it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Consent. Absolutely. Dearbhla?
Yeah, I think it's exactly to your point. GDPR for all of us is this quite new concept that individuals and businesses are trying to figure out and trying to see how we feel about it. It's certainly a very live conversation at the moment as we look more into, say, we're hopefully, as a world, we're moving into the phase of speeding up contact tracing in relation to COVID.
That was my next question, but please go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm doing the work for you.
Of course, you're a journalist. I'm just an amateur.
So yes, it is. We are so naturally as we move into this phase as a world, we're moving into the phase of contact tracing and obviously, the first thing that all of us want is because we have all been in lockdown for this amount of time. We just want it all to be solved. We know that the vaccine is quite a way off, but contact tracing is probably the next first step on this road to recovery in some way. But with this, with embracing all of these technologies comes a trade-off, and that trade-off is our data. So I think it will be really interesting over the next few weeks, the conversation about how much data we're willing to give over in order for all of this contact tracing and everything that goes around it for it to be effective, really. Because I think it's something that we haven't really thought so much about. In order for all of these apps to work, it needs a lot of information for us. And are we willing to make that trade-off as individuals and as societies as well?
As much as we haven't done that already, because using all the social media tools, etc., you do share this data by default.
Yeah.
And all your location services are always on in most of the cases for many people. So that's always works like this. But going to Afua, listening to all your answers so far, technology companies are in good hands if they're in your hands, because you definitely are favorable of this trade-off for the sake of the global common good. That's how I hear the media now, the media, voice of media. Afua, what is your opinion on that?
Well, I think I agree with a lot of what my colleagues have said previously, but I think coming from, again, referencing the report that the reports I've been doing, the reports that I've been covering, is that there's a feeling that there's a real need within the Black community, certainly, to find out the reasons why the death rates are so high. But when I also talk to people and talk about contact tracing, about testing people and tracing where people have been, but also about when we talk about wearable tech, when we talk about implants, to gather data of perhaps why Black people are dying of the conditions that they may have and how it affects COVID-19, is that people don't want to give over that data. So we're going to come to an impasse, certainly, if people aren't willing to perhaps let go of that data with consent to, like I said, talk about these data points, read between these data points. then we are going to have a problem, because if we can't figure out, first of all, if certain health conditions, how they're affecting COVID-19, how we can move forward. And then second of all, if you've had the disease, if we can track and trace, then we are going to reach a real impasse. But there's such a level of suspicion of big data, of big pharma, of government amongst communities that, like I said, we are going to reach an impasse. And that's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to sort of explain that. It's very difficult to navigate that field. And I do agree that we are going to, I think, need to relinquish some data so that we can figure out these things, so we can read between these data points. I think we're going to have a problem of getting that data, certainly from some communities, if not from a lot of people. But I know certainly within the Black community, there is such a level of suspicion that it might be nigh on impossible.
Thank you so much, Afua. That's the beauty of the leading media panel and forum. We have all these different points of views, including from verticals, from ethnic challenges and group challenges, etc. So we would love to share all this and to give it a thought. But at the end of the day, we have only 1 hour. And we're talking about health, but we should not forget mental health. And mental health is becoming and will be becoming even bigger issue as we've started in the beginning, being closed in our virtual worlds, shaped from the room walls that we inhabit. And this is a question to Ryan, but I would like to address all of you, and this will be basically, unfortunately, our last opportunity to discuss. But Ryan, I know that you have been recently writing about topics like virtual dating, and please share the social impact of COVID pandemic and how you see the future. Because again, that's very important topic. I know many of these, currently we have 7,000 people. Some of them were like smiling, ha ha ha, dating, but hey, that's so human, isn't it?
Yeah, I've done a number of stories recently about the kind of the human side of quarantine in general. So dating is one of them. I did a story called the Extrovert's Guide to Social Distancing. And I've done several about the idea of creating a quarantine or a pod or a small cohort of people. And just to kind of bring them all together, if you're craving human interaction, if you're an extrovert, if you want to date somebody, or if you want to have a small group of people, that's useful, and it's important to maintain your mental health. And if you create a group of 2 families, if you're living in a family, so 4 or 5 people in one family or 4 or 5 people in another family, and you join up to be a quarantine together, or if you're single, you have a group of 5 or 6 friends to create a quarantine, and you stay within that group. It's extremely important to not go socialize outside of that group, but you can have safe in-person interactions under a social distancing or a quarantine type of atmosphere if you're extremely responsible about it. And I think you have to do that because you need to maintain some sort of human bond that's not mediated through a screen or through FaceTime or through Zoom. So and then it goes without saying, if you do have a boyfriend or girlfriend that you've just met, they need to be part of that cohort or that pod or that quarantine, because going out and meeting multiple people is not safe right now. So if you are dating in person and not through a video chat app, you need to make sure that you're staying monogamous during this particular period of time.
There we are. We hear some monogacy preach here. And let's go back to all of the ladies in the panel. I'm not going to ask you about what the thoughts on monogamy, but I really put mental health at one of the tops of the health innovation of the future, especially if we move ahead further into the virtual experiences, immersive virtual experiences. Do you have any, especially, for example, Jayne, who is dealing with policies, etc. Do you see any steps ahead in this? And this question is to all of you.
Just quickly, I just did a story last week on the expected deaths of despair, the increase that's expected in suicide, alcohol, and drug deaths. And loneliness, which Ryan was touching on, is a huge part of it. Social isolation is terrible if you don't have any problems after a certain period of time. I'm not advocating not socially isolating. I'm just saying that there's the increased access to mental health care through virtual means is really important. And this is called the epidemic within the pandemic, the mental health crisis that's simmering and the increase in domestic violence. So now that we're going to have more of an ability to meet with mental health providers over the computer, over the phone, hopefully people who are just trustful of the healthcare system might be able to, accept that a little bit more. And this is going to show how many more community health workers we need and mental health workers, social workers, therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists.
I definitely expect here, particularly a boom of and growth in this particular sector, and I believe it will be for a better. I would like to have very, very briefly the other two ladies. Afua, please join this briefly in regards of mental health.
Well, I think I really agree with what my colleague said just there, is that the mental health really is the epidemic within the pandemic. And we did have the UN chief talking yesterday about this very topic and saying that he wants more work to be done and the mental health crisis to be addressed. And I think that's something that is so important, the isolation and the loneliness that people are feeling during quarantine and lockdown can be damaging, and it will be damaging across generations for a long time. I mean, we're not just talking about loneliness and isolation, but we're also talking about people losing their jobs, people losing their careers, their sense of self-worth. I mean, the under 25s are going to be hit by the recession that's going to come from this pandemic for the next 10 years or more. And that the chipping away of their sense of self-worth, of their mental health from this crisis is going to be huge. And we need to look at those impacts, but as well as that, on our young people, on our young ones, on our little ones who aren't seeing their friends, the loss of school, and the loss of the structures that has in place. And we know that there's looked after children in our society who rely on school for a hot meal, for support that goes beyond just education. And I think we need to look at the mental health effects of those children, of those young people, of our teenagers, of our under 25s as well, who are losing their careers. So the mental health impacts go right through the generations, and are very, very different across the board as well. So absolutely. I think definitely mental health is something that we do need to look at, but needs to be looked at in different layers and across the generations.
It's definite and it's needed. And Dearbhla, please, a very brief reflection on this particular topic. We are already 3 minutes over time.
Yeah, keep it brief. Yes, I could not agree more on the impact on younger people and also people finishing school. If I just look across the workforce, then this is going to be industry-led for sure. So we see that Google has asked its colleagues to take a day off to avoid burnout. Salesforce has appointed its first chief health officer ever, and it doesn't really know what that is going to be defined by, but they're making it a point anyway. I think this will have to be industry and employer led for sure, and I think we're going to see it actually become quite a value proposition and a competitive edge for companies as well and for industries. I know that not every company obviously can afford to have a chief health officer or put as much resources into health either. The big tech companies are kind of, an outlier in that sense. But I do think if there's any small, medium-sized entrepreneurs watching this as well, you have a role to play for sure, even if it's just opening your door and sending an email to all employees saying, hey, the lines of communication are open. Don't be afraid to talk to me about, how you're feeling, how you're managing. That little prompt can go a long way with people, because it's about not feeling though as it's going to be put on your record, or that, your employer is going to think that you're being lax about anything. It's a well-known fact that happy employees make more productive
Absolutely.
as well. So it's just about employers meeting their employees halfway and just trying their best to maintain a happy workforce for sure.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to even wrap up this discussion because it is all going to be published immediately after. We still have some 6,000 people with us, and I'm very, very grateful to all of you who were with us. And, thank you. It's always pleasure to hear points of views of people who are first thought leaders, sharing them with so many people, and then finding a way to discuss them between each other. So I'm very grateful for the time and the contribution of each and every one of you. I look forward to meet you again with us in the upcoming events. And now I would like to announce our next week programs. They're quite fascinating. And as usual at WEBIT, I should not say this though, but it is what it is. So we are expecting a wonderful next week, which will be under the theme of brand innovation. We shall be welcoming first Guy Kawasaki on Tuesday, along with our board member and of the Global Impact WEBIT community, Vivek Bapat, and some other fascinating participants. And then further, on Thursday, again, we shall be hosting a very special panel with truly phenomenal colleagues, journalists from all around the world, from leading media, the Leading Media Forum, and we shall be challenging how brands adapt and cope with COVID-19 crisis. So have a wonderful week ahead until the end of the week, and wonderful weekend. And then see you on Tuesday at the same time, the WEBIT Hour, as part of the WEBIT Virtual program. Thank you all for being with us, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
This program is powered by the Virtual.show, making your offline events virtual.